The fluorescent lights of the Deep Space Monitoring Station cast a harsh glow over Dr. Amanda Reynolds' face as she leaned closer to her display. The anomalous signals had appeared 17 minutes ago, and they weren't matching any known patterns in the database. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, running comparison algorithms she'd developed during her tenure at SETI. "Hey, Mike," she called out to her colleague, not taking her eyes off the screen. "Are you seeing this on Array B?" Mike Wheeler, a veteran radio astronomer with more gray than brown in his beard, wheeled his chair over. "Yeah, picked it up about 20 minutes ago. Thought it was equipment malfunction at first, but..." He trailed off as a new wave of data flooded their screens. "This isn't random." Amanda's voice carried an edge of excitement mixed with apprehension. "These patterns, they're structured. Too structured for natural phenomena." The signal was coming from just beyond the Kuiper belt, and it was getting stronger. Amanda's hands trembled slightly as she initiated the first contact protocols they'd practiced but never expected to use. Within minutes, the station's secure line to the Pentagon was active. "This is Dr. Amanda Reynolds at Deep Space Monitoring Station Alpha. We have a Code Omega situation." "I repeat, Code Omega." The response was immediate. "Stand by for secure connection, Dr. Reynolds." What happened next would be recorded in history books as humanity's first real contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, and its first warning of what was to come. The massive ships appeared first as points of light, then as distinct shapes against the starfield. They moved with an impossible grace for their size, decelerating into high Earth orbit with technology that made humanity's best efforts look primitive by comparison. The message came simultaneously across all frequencies, in perfect English and every other major Earth language. The translation was flawless, which should have been the first warning sign. "People of Earth, we are the Kraxan Empire. Your world has been identified as a potential protectorate within our sphere of influence. Your technological development has reached a sufficient level for initial contact. We offer you the opportunity to join our empire as a client species. Acceptance will grant you access to advanced technology and protection. Resistance will be met with appropriate measures." In the Pentagon's war room, General David Martinez watched the transmission with narrowed eyes. 30 years of military service had taught him to read between the lines of diplomatic speech. This wasn't an invitation. It was an ultimatum wrapped in polite terms. "Reminds me of something," he muttered to Colonel Sarah West, his strategic operations officer. "Sir?" 1937. Imperial Japan's peace terms to China. Different words, same tone. He turned to the room full of military leaders. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're looking at a textbook case of gunboat diplomacy. They're not here to make friends." In the next 48 hours, Earth's military leadership began the most crucial mobilization in human history. While civilian governments scrambled to formulate diplomatic responses, veteran commanders from nations across the globe recognized the signs. The Kraxan's diplomatic fleet was positioned in classic invasion formation, the same pattern human armies had used for centuries when preparing to subjugate a weaker opponent. Back at the monitoring station, Amanda worked through the night, analyzing every bit of data from the alien ships. Something about their communication patterns nagged at her professional instincts. The translations were too perfect, the diplomatic language too precise. "They've been watching us," she realized, sending her findings to the Pentagon. "These aren't first contact protocols. They're invasion preparations." General Martinez received her report with grim satisfaction. The Kraxan had made a critical mistake. They'd revealed their hand too early. Every hour they spent on diplomatic posturing was an hour Earth's military could use to prepare. In orbit, the Kraxan ships maintained their positions, their crews confident in their technological superiority. They had conquered dozens of worlds this way, and Earth seemed no different. They didn't realize that below them, humanity's military forces were quietly mobilizing, drawing upon centuries of warfare experience that the Kraxan couldn't begin to comprehend. The clock was ticking toward humanity's greatest test, and despite the odds, Earth's defenders allowed themselves small smiles. After all, humans had been preparing for this moment since they first pointed spears at each other across prehistoric battlefields. The Kraxan were about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating their opponents. The International Space Station hung against Earth's azure backdrop, its solar panels gleaming in the sunlight. Inside, Commander Elena Santos helped the last crew member into the emergency escape pod, her movements calm despite the urgency of their situation. "Ground control, this is ISS. Final evacuation proceeding as planned," she reported, her voice steady. The Kraxan hadn't noticed the systematic withdrawal of the station's crew over the past 24 hours, disguised as routine shuttle movements. In the Pentagon's underground command center, Dr. Amanda Reynolds studied the data streaming from the station's sensors. The Kraxan ships had shifted formation slightly, their energy signatures spiking in a way that made her pulse quicken. "General Martinez, they're powering up their weapons," she announced, her fingers flying across the holographic display. "But there's something odd about their shield frequencies. They're cyclical." Before Martinez could respond, the Kraxan's next message boomed through every communication device on Earth. "Your species' reluctance to accept our generous offer is noted. A demonstration of our capabilities seems necessary." The blast came without warning, a lance of purple energy that turned the International Space Station into expanding clouds of superheated metal. The Kraxan had chosen their target carefully, expecting to strike fear into humanity's heart by destroying their greatest space achievement along with its crew. Instead, they just made their first major tactical error. "Signal analysis complete," Amanda announced, her eyes bright with discovery. "Their weapon signature matches their shield frequency patterns. They're using the same fundamental technology for both." Commander Jack Harper, newly recalled from retirement, stepped forward from the shadows of the command center. His weathered face bore the scars of countless Black Ops missions, and his eyes held the calculating look of a predator sizing up its prey. "So their strength is also their weakness," he mused, studying the holographic display of the Kraxan fleet. "Just like any overconfident opponent." The next 12 hours were a masterclass in military deception. While civilian governments publicly wrung their hands over the destruction of the ISS, Earth's combined military forces executed their countermeasures with practiced precision. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, nuclear submarines slipped away from their usual patrol routes, carrying special payloads designed according to Dr. Reynolds' specifications. In hidden bunkers across the globe, tactical units ran combat simulations based on the Kraxan's demonstrated capabilities. Commander Harper led a briefing for Special Forces teams from 24 nations, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "They expect us to be shocked, terrorized, paralyzed with fear," he told the assembled warriors. "That's their weakness. They've never faced an enemy who spent millennia perfecting the art of war." The Kraxan's next message came exactly when General Martinez predicted it would. "Your time for peaceful submission expires in 12 Earth hours. Demonstrate your compliance by disabling your primitive defensive systems and preparing your resource centers for our administration." In the command center, Amanda's team had cracked another piece of the puzzle. "Their communications are quantum encrypted," she explained to the military leadership, "but they're using a predictable pattern. They don't expect us to have any comprehension of quantum mechanics." "Arrogance," Harper commented, "the downfall of every empire throughout history." The next few hours were critical. While civilian leaders publicly debated surrender terms, buying precious time, Earth's militaries moved their pieces into position. Satellite networks were quietly reconfigured. Weapon systems were modified based on Amanda's findings about the Kraxan's shield frequencies. As the deadline approached, General Martinez gathered his command staff. "Throughout human history," he said, looking each person in the eye, "we've faced opponents who believed their superior technology or numbers guaranteed victory. The Persians at Thermopylae, the Spanish Armada, Operation Desert Storm. Each time, They learned that warfare isn't about who has the biggest stick. It's about who knows how to fight. In orbit, the Kraxan ships maintained their threatening positions, their crews confident in their imminent victory. They didn't notice the subtle movements of debris that weren't debris, the silent positioning of weapons platforms disguised as communication satellites, or the steady stream of data being gathered about their every movement. The clock ticked down toward their deadline, but Earth's defenders weren't watching it. They were waiting for their own countdown to reach zero. Operation Shadow Forge began in the tunnels beneath Moscow, where Russian special forces loaded experimental electromagnetic pulse devices onto retrofitted Cold War-era vehicles. The Kraxan sensors, focused on modern military installations, completely missed the activity in these abandoned Soviet bunkers. Commander Jack Harper stood in a hardened facility deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching feeds from around the globe. "Status report on civilian evacuation patterns," he asked, his voice carrying the calm of a veteran commander. "Proceeding exactly as planned, sir," Lieutenant Maria Ortiz reported. "The Kraxan are tracking mass population movements toward designated refugee centers. They're interpreting it exactly as we hoped: panic and disorganization. What the aliens didn't know was that mixed among the streams of civilian vehicles were elite military units, their weapons and equipment concealed in what appeared to be household goods and refugee supplies. Every panicked evacuation was a carefully choreographed movement of forces into strategic positions. In her secured lab, Dr. Amanda Reynolds worked with a global team of scientists, analyzing the data from their probes of Kraxan shield frequencies. "Their overconfidence is staggering," she commented to her colleagues. "They're not even bothering to vary their shield harmonics. They've never needed to before." The Kraxan observers watched Earth's apparent chaos with smug satisfaction. Their sensors detected primitive nuclear weapons being moved to supposedly secret locations, exactly what they expected from a frightened, technologically inferior species. They didn't realize these obvious movements were masking the real preparations happening right under their nose. Deep in the Indian Ocean, submarines from a dozen nations gathered silently. Their crews had trained for years in the art of staying undetected, and now those skills were being put to an unexpected use. Commander Sarah Chen of the U.S. Virginia sent a brief encoded transmission. Phase 1 complete. All units in position. In orbit, apparently defunct satellites began subtle course corrections, their movements masked by the debris field created by the ISS's destruction. Each piece of space junk was precisely placed, creating a three-dimensional grid that would prove crucial in the coming hours. "Interesting," mused General Martinez, studying the tactical display. "They're positioning their ships exactly like the British did at the Battle of Singapore. Same mistake too. All their guns pointed the wrong way." In bunkers across Europe, squadrons of fighters were being loaded with specially modified missiles. The designs had been rushed through production in secret facilities, incorporating Dr. Reynolds' discoveries about Kraxan shield vulnerabilities. The pilots studied combat footage from the ISS destruction, memorizing the aliens' attack patterns. Commander Harper coordinated with his international counterparts through quantum-encrypted channels that the Kraxan hadn't detected. "The beauty of it," he explained to his team, "is that they think they're watching us collapse into chaos. They don't realize that humans have been practicing organized chaos for centuries." Underground facilities that had been built during the Cold War came alive again. In Switzerland, mountain bunkers that the world had forgotten about housed advanced electronic warfare centers. Swedish facilities buried in granite coordinated with Australian desert installations, creating a web of command and control that was practically invisible to orbital surveillance. Dr. Reynolds made another breakthrough at hour 18 of her continuous work session. "Their sensor systems," she announced to the command staff, "they're calibrated for their level of technology. They literally can't detect anything they consider too primitive. It's like they're looking for smartphones while we're using signal mirrors." The Kraxan continued their psychological warfare, broadcasting images of their previous conquests. They expected Earth's resistance to crumble at the sight of their power. Instead, military analysts studied every frame, identifying patterns and weaknesses in Kraxan tactical doctrine. As the operation entered its final phase, Commander Harper addressed his multinational force. Throughout history, every great military victory has had one thing in common. The enemy never saw the real threat until it was too late. The Kraxan think they're watching us prepare to surrender. Let's show them what a real military preparation looks like. In orbit, the Kraxan fleet maintained their dominant position, their commanders confident in their inevitable victory. Below them, humanity's forces completed their preparations with the precision of countless wars' experience. The trap was set, and the Kraxan were about to learn why humans had survived millennia of conflict. The Kraxan launched their invasion at dawn, Greenwich Mean Time. Their energy weapons lit up the sky above major military installations worldwide, a devastating display of power meant to break humanity's will to resist. The alien sensors showed their targets obliterated, reduced to smoking craters. Their commanders exchanged congratulatory messages, celebrating another successful first strike. Then Commander Jack Harper's voice cut through their command channel. "Thank you for the weapons demonstration. Our turn." The first indication that something was wrong came when their sensors detected multiple launches from the supposedly destroyed bases. The Kraxan commanders weren't concerned. Their shields had never failed against primitive projectile weapons. Dr. Amanda Reynolds watched from the underground command center as her frequency-matching warheads approached their targets. "They're not even attempting to modify their shield harmonics," she said, a hint of disbelief in her voice. "They really don't think they need to." The first missile struck a Kraxan destroyer above Beijing. Its shield flickered with familiar purple energy, then collapsed completely as the warhead's frequency matched and canceled its protective field. The kinetic impact alone would have been devastating. The electromagnetic pulse that followed turned the mighty warship into a drifting hulk. Multiple direct hits confirmed, Lieutenant Ortiz reported, her voice steady as she read the tactical display. Enemy fleet reporting shield failures across all sectors. They're attempting to adapt, but they've never had to adapt quickly, Harper finished, allowing himself a grim smile. That's what happens when you've never faced a real fight. The Kraxans' response was predictable. They launched their fighter squadrons, expecting to overwhelm Earth's primitive defenses with superior numbers. Instead, they flew straight into Operation Broken Mirror. Those seemingly random pieces of space debris suddenly made sense, creating a three-dimensional maze that channeled the alien fighters into predetermined kill zones. Indian, Japanese, and Brazilian space-modified fighters erupted from hidden positions, engaging the enemy with tactics perfected in centuries of aerial combat. "They're flying in rigid formations," noted Colonel Wei from Chinese Air Command. "Like the Japanese at Midway. They have no concept of adaptive tactics." Below the atmosphere, the real surprise was unfolding. The Kraxan had expected resistance from military bases and had focused their attention accordingly. They weren't prepared for attacks from civilian shipping vessels, retrofitted with hidden weapon systems. Centuries of disguising warships as merchants proved just as effective in space as it had on Earth's oceans. In the Pacific, submarines that had quietly positioned themselves during the evacuation chaos launched their payloads. The missiles took trajectories that seemed random to Kraxan tactical computers, but made perfect sense to humans who had studied the art of overwhelming missile defense systems. "Multiple enemy capital ships disabled," Ortiz reported. "Their command and control structure is showing signs of strain. They're falling back on preset protocols. Just like every military that's never faced defeat," Harper commented. "They don't know how to handle surprise because they've never needed to learn." Dr. Reynolds' team continued feeding real-time analysis to the combat units. They're trying to adapt their shield frequencies, but they're doing it systematically, predictably, sending new targeting solutions now. The space around Earth had become a graveyard of Kraxan ships. Their superior technology meant nothing against an enemy that had spent millennia learning how to fight smarter, not just harder. Every counter-strategy they attempted had been anticipated, planned for, and turned against them. In their command ships, Kraxan officers faced something none of their tactical simulations had prepared them for, an enemy that fought with both primitive and advanced weapons, that struck from impossible angles, that seemed to have no fixed strategy yet coordinated perfectly. "Signal from the Kraxan flagship," Ortiz announced. "They're demanding to know how we developed our tactics." Harper looked at General Martinez, who nodded. "Send them our response. Welcome to Earth. You're not the first to underestimate us. Most don't live to make that mistake twice." The first phase of Earth's defense was over, but every military leader knew this was just the beginning. The Kraxan would regroup, adapt, and return, but now they knew what humanity's military forces had known all along. Technology alone doesn't win wars. The true art of warfare is in the mind, in experience, in the countless lessons written in blood throughout history. And in that art, humanity had no equal. Con. Sonar. No contacts. Grid sector clear. Commander Sarah Chen of the U.S. Virginia allowed herself a small smile as her submarine glided silently through the void of space. The same stealth technologies that had made submarines invisible in Earth's oceans proved remarkably effective in space, especially when your enemy didn't think to look for them. "Maintain course and speed," she ordered quietly, a habit ingrained from years of silent running. Just like hunting diesels in the South China Sea. The Virginia led a pack of submarines turned spaceworks, their hulls modified for vacuum, but their essential nature unchanged. They were hunters, patient and invisible, waiting for their prey. In the Pentagon Command Center, Dr. Amanda Reynolds monitored the Ghost Fleet's positions. "The Kraxan reinforcements are arriving exactly where we predicted," she reported. Their FTL signatures matched the patterns from their first arrival. Commander Harper studied the tactical display, his expression thoughtful. "They're following standard military doctrine, rushing reinforcements through the same breakthrough point, just like von Kluck at the Marne in 1914. He tapped a command into his console. "All Ghost Fleet units, execute Operation Deep Sound." The space around Earth's L2 point erupted in controlled chaos. The Kraxan reinforcement fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel directly into the Ghost Fleet's killing ground. Before their sensors could adjust to normal space, before their shields could fully power up, they faced a barrage of attacks from enemies they couldn't detect. "Multiple hits confirmed," Lieutenant Ortiz reported. "Enemy ships showing signs of confusion. They're attempting to establish a defensive formation, but they can't locate our units." The Kraxan commanders frantically ordered their ships to scan for Earth vessels, but their advanced sensors were calibrated all wrong. They were looking for engine emissions, shield harmonics, energy signatures, while Earth's Ghost Fleet ran silent, dark, and deadly. "Fascinating," Dr. Reynolds murmured, analyzing the data. "Their sensor systems are so advanced, they've actually lost the ability to detect simpler approaches. They can't find us because they're looking too hard." In her submarine-turned spaceship, Commander Chen ordered another salvo. Her crew operated with the precision of centuries of submarine warfare doctrine, their movements economical and silent. The modified torpedoes, designed according to Dr. Reynolds' specifications, struck their targets with devastating accuracy. "They're switching to wideband scanning," Ortiz announced. "Attempting to locate our units by process of elimination." Harper nodded. "Just as expected. Execute Phase 2. Across Earth's orbital space, previously dormant satellites suddenly activated, broadcasting a cacophony of false signatures. The Kraxan sensors, already struggling to adapt to hunting silent vessels, were now overwhelmed with phantom targets. "Message intercepted from Kraxan Command," Ortiz reported, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "They're ordering all ships to switch to basic optical scanning. Their advanced sensors are useless in this environment. By the time they see us," Chen transmitted from the Virginia, "it'll be too late, just like it always was in the Black Deep." The battle continued for hours, a deadly game of hide-and-seek played out across millions of cubic kilometers of space. The Kraxan ships, unable to establish effective formations or coordinated defense, fell one by one to enemies they couldn't find. In their command ships, Kraxan officers faced a terrifying reality. They were being hunted by an enemy that understood stealth warfare on a level they had never imagined possible. Their attempts to adapt were too little, too late. Enemy fleet is beginning to break formation, Ortiz reported. They're abandoning their planned invasion coordinates. Harper watched the tactical display as the mighty Kraxan reinforcement fleet scattered, their disciplined formation dissolving into chaos. Send to all Ghost Fleet units. Happy hunting. The message was unnecessary. Earth's submarine commanders were already in pursuit, applying centuries of predator-prey doctrine learned in Earth's oceans to the vast expanses of space. The Kraxan might have mastered faster-than-light travel, but humanity had mastered something far more fundamental, the art of the silent kill. As the battle neared its end, Dr. Reynolds noted something in the Kraxan communications. "They're not calling us primitives anymore," she observed. "Now they're calling us ghosts." "Good," Harper replied. "Let them learn what every naval power in human history eventually learned. The deadliest predators are the ones you never see coming." The Kraxan High Command received the first transmission in their own language at 300 Earth UTC. "Your fleet deployments mirror the Battle of Jutland, 1916 Earth calendar. That strategy resulted in a Pyrrhic victory at best. Recommend immediate tactical revision." The message was followed by a detailed analysis of their current formation's weaknesses, complete with historical references they didn't understand. The Kraxan commanders, already rattled by their losses to the Ghost Fleet, faced a new kind of warfare, one that attacked their minds as much as their ships. In the Pentagon's Psychological Warfare Division, Commander Jack Harper watched the Kraxans' reactions with satisfaction. "Send the next analysis package," he ordered. "Focus on their repeated use of outdated containment patterns." Dr. Amanda Reynolds had helped craft these messages, combining her understanding of Kraxan psychology with Earth's military history. "They've never faced criticism of their tactics before," she observed. "Their command structure doesn't know how to handle it." The psychological assault continued relentlessly. Every time the Kraxan adjusted their formation, they received detailed breakdowns of why their changes were inadequate, supported by centuries of Earth's military experiences. Their commanders began second-guessing every decision, paralyzed by the knowledge that their enemies understood warfare better than they did. "Enemy flagship is showing signs of command paralysis," Lieutenant Ortiz reported. "They're taking twice as long to issue basic orders." "Just like the Germans after Ultra was cracked," Harper noted. "When you know your enemy can read your playbook, you start to doubt every play." But the psychological warfare was just the setup for Operation Mindbreak. As the Kraxan command structure struggled with their tactical paralysis, they detected multiple small objects approaching their ships. Scans revealed them to be primitive chemical rockets, easily deflected by their shields. "They're launching missiles they know can't hurt us," a Kraxan commander observed. "Have they become desperate?" The truth was far more devastating. Hidden among the decoy missiles were specialist insertion pods, using the Kraxans' own arrogance as cover. While their sensors focused on the obvious threats, Earth's most elite special forces teams slipped through their defenses. "Boarders have breached Kraxan vessel designate Alpha 7, Ortiz announced. Team Raptor reports successful penetration. Inside the Kraxan ships, scenes from humanity's long history of naval warfare played out in space. Teams of soldiers, using tactics perfected by centuries of boarding actions, moved through alien corridors with lethal efficiency. The Kraxan crews, never trained for internal defense, faced an enemy that had been perfecting close-quarters combat since the age of wooden ships. They're broadcasting their internal security feeds to their entire fleet," Dr. Reynolds reported, monitoring the Kraxan communications. "They can't help themselves. They've never seen anything like this." The footage spread panic through the Kraxan fleet. They watched in horror as human warriors, seemingly primitive in their mechanical pressure suits, systematically took control of their advanced vessels, using nothing more complex than ancient battle doctrine and practiced skill. Message from Team Raptor, Ortiz announced. They've secured the ship's command center, beginning data extraction. The information they pulled from Kraxan computers was worth more than a dozen battlefield victories. But the real damage was to Kraxan morale. Their crews watched helplessly as humans demonstrated mastery of warfare on every level, from grand fleet tactics to hand-to-hand combat. Send the final psychological package, Harper ordered. Let's complete their education. The message went out to every Kraxan ship. Your tactics display a fundamental misunderstanding of warfare's true nature. Technology is a tool, not a guarantee. We've spent millennia learning this lesson. Class dismissed. In their remaining ships, Kraxan commanders faced a terrifying revelation. They had believed their superior technology made them invincible, only to be systematically dismantled by an enemy that understood warfare on a deeper level. Enemy fleet is showing signs of widespread psychological breakdown, Ortiz reported. Multiple ships are requesting permission to retreat. Harper nodded, satisfied. Send to all units. Let them go. They've learned today's lesson. The Kraxan ships that could still maneuver began pulling back, their retreat haunted by one final transmission. Next time, bring soldiers instead of tourists. This is what real warfare looks like. Operation Valkyrie began with silence. Across Earth's orbital sphere, military communications went dead. Radar stations powered down. Defense satellites fell dormant. To the Kraxan's remaining fleet, it appeared as if humanity's military command structure had finally collapsed. They're taking the bait, Commander Jack Harper observed from the quantum-shielded command center, moving their heavy units exactly where we want them. Dr. Amanda Reynolds monitored the energy signatures of the approaching Kraxan ships. Their shield frequencies are still cycling through the patterns we identified. They haven't learned. The Kraxan fleet, believing they had finally broken Earth's resistance, moved to capitalize on their perceived advantage. Their ships descended into lower orbit, preparing for the final phase of their invasion plan. Status of Operation Valkyrie assets, General Martinez asked, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's final gambit. All units in position, Lieutenant Ortiz reported. Ghost fleet standing by. Ground teams confirm readiness. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. While the Kraxan focused their attention on major military installations, they'd completely overlooked the civilian space program facilities. Hidden among weather satellites and communication arrays were humanity's newest weapons, designed specifically for this moment. Execute primary sequence, Harper ordered. All units, initiate Valkyrie protocols. The first sign that something was wrong came when the Kraxan's quantum communications suddenly failed. Dr. Reynolds' team had finally cracked their encryption, flooding their networks with carefully crafted chaos. Their command and control is fragmenting, Ortiz reported. Individual ship commanders are reverting to autonomous operations. That's when the Ghost Fleet struck. Commander Chen's submarines, now positioned above the Kraxan fleet, launched their final salvos. But these weren't conventional weapons. They were delivery systems for Special Forces teams equipped with Dr. Reynolds' latest breakthrough. Boarding teams report successful penetration of Target Alpha through Echo, Ortiz announced. Running silent protocol engaged. Inside the Kraxan ships, elite soldiers moved like shadows through alien corridors. Their targets weren't the bridges or engineering sections. They were heading for very specific points identified through weeks of careful intelligence gathering. They're finally realizing something's wrong, Reynolds noted, watching the Kraxan energy signatures spike erratically. But they still don't know what. The Kraxan's fatal mistake became clear as their ships tried to retreat to higher orbit. The seemingly abandoned military satellites suddenly activated, creating a web of overlapping fields that disrupted their engines' power distribution. All teams report ready, Ortiz announced, awaiting final authorization. Harper looked to General Martinez, who nodded gravely. Send the code phrase. Across the battlefield, human forces received the same message. Remember Pearl Harbor. The boarding teams, positioned at critical junctions throughout the Kraxan fleet, activated their devices simultaneously. Dr. Reynolds' frequency matching technology had evolved. Instead of just disrupting shields, it could now create devastating resonance cascades within the ship's power systems. Multiple catastrophic failures detected in enemy fleet, Ortiz reported, her voice steady despite the unfolding destruction. Their command structure is completely compromised. The Kraxan ships began to break apart from within, their mighty technology turned against them by an enemy they had fatally underestimated. Those that attempted to flee found their escape routes blocked by the Ghost Fleet, which had emerged from stealth to close the trap. Message from the Kraxan flagship, Ortiz announced. They're requesting terms. Harper allowed himself a grim smile. Send our response. Unconditional surrender only. You chose this battlefield. Now face the consequences. The battle that followed was brief but decisive. The remaining Kraxan ships, their crews demoralized and their technology compromised, faced the full fury of humanity's military might. Special Forces teams had transmitted the location of every critical system, every weakness, every vulnerability, and Earth's forces exploited them all. Enemy fleet is broadcasting surrender signals on all frequencies, Ortiz reported finally. Operation Valkyrie is complete. In the command center, Dr. Reynolds studied the final data streams from the battle. They never understood, she mused. They thought warfare was about technology. No, Harper replied, watching the Kraxan ships power down one by one. Warfare is about will, intelligence, and experience. Technology just determines the playing field. The stars above Earth glittered with debris from humanity's greatest victory. A testament to what happens when an advanced civilization learns, too late, that true military might isn't measured in technological superiority, but in the determination and skill of its warriors. News of Earth's victory spread through the galaxy like a shockwave. The Kraxan Empire, undefeated for 3 centuries, had been systematically dismantled by what they had dismissed as a primitive species. In the aftermath, their surviving commanders faced questioning from their own government, and from curious alien species who suddenly saw humanity in a very different light. In the Pentagon's main briefing room, Commander Jack Harper stood before representatives from 24 nations' military forces. The holographic display behind him showed the debris field that had once been the Kraxan invasion fleet. The final analysis confirms what we suspected, he began. The Kraxan didn't fail because of inferior technology. They failed because they forgot the fundamental truth that every human warrior learns. War is fought with weapons, but won with minds. Dr. Amanda Reynolds' presentation followed, her data painting a clear picture of the technological gulf they had overcome. Their ships were centuries ahead of ours, she explained, but their tactical doctrine was millennia behind. They never developed the complex strategies that Earth's constant conflicts forced us to create. The captured Kraxan databases revealed a species that had relied on technological superiority for so long that they had forgotten the art of true warfare. Their training simulations were basic, their tactics unchanged for generations, their strategies built entirely around overwhelming force. In effect, Commander Chen added from her seat in the audience, they were space-faring amateurs playing at war until they met the professionals. The implications of Earth's victory rippled through galactic society. Other species, previously intimidated by Kraxan technology, began reaching out to Earth, not for military technology, but for tactical doctrine and training. Message from the Galactic Council, Lieutenant Ortiz reported during one of their daily briefings. They're requesting permission to send military observers to Earth. Apparently, several species want to learn what they call the human way of war. General Martinez found this grimly amusing. Centuries of conflict, countless lives lost in warfare. And now it turns out we were becoming the galaxy's greatest military power without even knowing it. The Kraxan Empire's response to their defeat proved they had learned at least one lesson. Their new government, established after their military leadership was removed, sent a formal diplomatic mission to Earth. Their message was simple: they wished to learn. "It's ironic," Dr. Reynolds noted, reviewing the Kraxan request. "They came to teach us about advanced technology, and instead we taught them about warfare. Now they're asking to learn both." In orbit, the combined Earth fleet, now incorporating captured and modified Kraxan technology, maintained its vigilant watch. But there was a difference. The ships now carried crews from dozens of nations, their centuries-old rivalries set aside in recognition of a larger truth. Humanity's strength lay in its diversity of military thought and experience. Commander Harper's final report to the UN Security Council became required reading throughout human space. Our victory wasn't won by any single strategy or weapon. It was won because humanity never stopped learning, never stopped adapting, never stopped preparing for the next conflict. What our enemies saw as primitive warfare was actually the most advanced military thinking in the galaxy, tested and refined in the crucible of Earth's conflicts. The Kraxans' surrender terms, now displayed in military academies worldwide, included an unprecedented admission. "We acknowledge that technological superiority alone does not constitute military superiority. The humans have proven that centuries of practical warfare experience cannot be replaced by advanced technology. We submit to their tactical wisdom." Dr. Reynolds' frequency matching technology became Earth's first major contribution to galactic science, but it wasn't the most significant. Humanity's real contribution was something far more fundamental: a deep understanding of warfare in all its forms, from strategy to psychology, from tactics to technology. In the years that followed, Earth established itself as the galaxy's premier military power, not through conquest, but through respect earned on that first battlefield. The final transmission from Commander Harper to the retreating Kraxan fleet became a motto adopted by human forces throughout space. Remember this lesson well. You sought conflict with those you thought primitive, only to meet the professionals. Next time, do your homework. And throughout the galaxy, potential adversaries did exactly that, and decided that challenging humanity's military might wasn't worth the cost of learning those lessons firsthand.